knowledge sharing in the energy industry, which is confronted with major challenges nowadays, as we all know. I would like to thank in advance our presenters, Mark Vivian Robinson, Business Development Director, and Eugene DeCoin, Lead Power System Analyst of Highview Power, and Alex Hunter, the CEO of Sherwood Power, providing an insight into their developments and achievements. Energy security is a cornerstone of the UK's foreign policy engagement in the CE region, and it is indeed the aim to be reached by Hungary as well. And collaboration on energy storage, grid modernization, renewable integration helps reduce dependence on external suppliers and strengthens regional stability. The UK brings deep expertise in clean energy innovation and regulatory framework, offering valuable partnership to accelerate the transition. Today's agenda is focusing on energy storage, which provides flexibility needed to balance supply and demand, smooth out intermittency, and ensure that clean energy is available when we need it the most. It is not just a technical solution, but strategical asset. The energy system, however, requires diverse technologies to handle different durations, scales, and use cases. And technologies like liquid air energy storage, compressed air, thermal storage, and hydrogen-based systems may offer scalable solutions. Highview Power is a global leader in liquid air storage, offering grid-scale, long-duration storage. Sherwood Power helps industrial and commercial users lower costs, improve power quality, and increase competitiveness while supporting grid stability and capacity expansion with their patented free air bank technology. I'm keen to know more about these technologies. So Mark, Eugene, and Alex, please take the floor. I'm pretty sure that questions will follow.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. This is Mark Vivian. I'm also joined by Eugenie, Power Systems Analysis, but I've also got Gary Spence, who can introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Gary Priest. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Highview. So I'm responsible for the division that does all of the analysis that underpins our technology deployments and also the revenue that we expect to generate. I'm a power system engineer as well.
Thank you, Gary. I'm just waiting for my screen to go on full mode. Great, there we go. So I'm Mark Vivian, Business Development Director for Highview Power. What we'll be doing is I'll go through a presentation, maybe half an hour or so, and then I'll hand over to Eugenie, who's going to demonstrate some of our power systems modelling, which underpins all of our investments. So to start off with, I've got one slide which summarises really my whole presentation and summarises Highview, of course, itself. So who is Highview? Highview is a developer of long-duration energy storage. Our particular technology is liquid air, and we've been developing this technology for about 16 years. We started off with a sort of laboratory scale, then the demonstration, 2 demonstration projects. But our big news is that last year, in June of last year, we raised £300 million to build our first commercial scale, utility scale project. And that is the project at Carrington, which is near Manchester. And that is a 6-hour, 50 megawatts liquid air energy storage system. The first phase will be operational during 2026 and the rest in 2027. Also last year, the government did a number of things. The first thing they did was that they confirmed that they're going to introduce a revenue support mechanism for long duration energy storage. This is the cap and floor. This decision was taken to ask our regulator, Ofgem, to implement this cap and floor. So we, at the same time, announced 4 projects that we're looking to build out by 2030. Around about the same time, the government asked NESO, our system operator, to publish a plan for 2030, which is the Clean Power 2030 Action Power. And then the government responded later with their own action plan in December. What these plans basically said is that they're looking to increase the amount of long duration energy storage from around 2.8 gigawatts today to around 4 to 6 gigawatts by 2030. So, almost a doubling of the current capacity. Ofgem is now implementing this cap and floor scheme. They have kept to their programme. They completed in September a project assessment process, a project eligibility process. And we have 2 projects which have been deemed to be eligible. We are now in the process of preparing our project assessment application, which is due next week. Ofgem will then review this application along with all the other applications, and will make a decision on which projects will get a cap and floor in this revenue support mechanism in around March next year, with a final decision in July. In the interim, Highview has not stopped developing projects. Last week we announced that we've raised another 130 million for a stability island project at Huntston. This effectively is a generator which we will form phase 1 of a full liquid air project. It's a phase 1 that consists of a generator but acting as a synchronous compensator. And this means we can start to earn revenues early in advance of the Carrington project, and allows us to start the process of building out a much larger project. So that very quickly is who we are and what we've been doing. What makes Highview different? I think one of the key things that makes us different from other developers is that we don't just develop technology, we are also extremely strong on our power system analytics, which is what my colleagues are managing. So we are the only company that we're aware of that's built an optimum power flow model that analyzes the GB transmission network. We can use this model to understand where to place our assets, and we can use this modeling to demonstrate to investors that our assets will be used. We're also using this knowledge in other jurisdictions, like in Australia and in Ireland. We're also, although we're famous for being a developer of liquid air, we're actually, in the longer term, will be technology neutral. And we are very happy to put together a mix of technologies. In fact, our next projects in the UK will be a hybrid of liquid air and battery storage. And what we're looking at in projects in Australia is a mixture of solar, battery storage, stability islands, and liquid air. So we're very much on a trajectory of integrating a mixture of technologies which provides the best benefit to the system operator. And finally, we have today some very strong shareholders that enables us to maximise the investment by putting in place the most efficient capital model. So we have already raised around about £500 million. And we're well placed to continue raising for our next projects. So why is, again, just to build on the introduction already given by Christina, why is long duration energy storage so important, particularly in the UK at the moment? The reason is that we are a leader in offshore wind. We've got a lot of offshore wind being built as well as other renewables. But what we've found is that a lot of that offshore wind is being wasted. So something like 8.3 terawatt hours was wasted last year. And that costs the grid around about 1 billion to pay for the compensations, but also to turn up. So what happens when wind is curtailed, largely due to transmission constraints, is that they turn down the wind. and have to reimburse the owners of the wind farms for their subsidies. But they then have to turn up a thermal power station elsewhere in the UK to balance the system. And so that is where the money is being lost, but also a huge amount of CO2 emissions as well. And these costs to stabilise the grid are forecast to grow to about 8 billion by 2030. And the curtailment to increase to around about 41 terawatt hours by 2035. And these are NESO's own numbers. Again, why is long duration energy storage so important? Well, I mentioned the clean power targets that the UK is targeting. The increase in renewables by 2030 is quite phenomenal. Just to pick out a few numbers, we're expecting to increase onshore and offshore wind by about 150% to 180% by 2030. We're looking to increase our amount of generation from clean sources from about 60% to 95% by 2030. I think another big change that's happening, and it might not be so obvious, another big change is that the UK is moving away from a market which is going to be purely just market driven, where developers select where projects are going to be placed based on market signals, to a world where NESO and Ofgem are going to be far more directive about where they want assets to be built. And this is quite a big change as well, because in the future we see NESO saying we want this particular type of asset being built at this particular type of location to ensure they have the most optimum energy transition. And that's a big change from the way that the UK is managed to date, where it's developers that put grid connections in and effectively choose where they want to build things. And then it's NESO's problem to then try and balance the system. Just to illustrate this point on curtailment, this slide shows how much wind curtailment has grown over the last 2.5 years. I haven't updated this slide for a couple of months, but already in July, you're seeing that we'd exceeded the amount of curtailment that we'd seen in 2023. So as I said, NESO themselves are forecasting that curtailment will increase to 8 terawatt hours by 2030. We think the reality, based on the actual real transmission system, is that 8 terawatt hours will be reached far, far earlier than 2030. Sorry, it was going on as well. So they said 45 by 2035. But in terms of the costs, I think the costs will be achieved far earlier than what they're forecasting. Again, just another one on background on the need for long duration energy storage. This is a snapshot of the government's clean power and the system operators' clean power targets. The chart on the left shows that long duration storage, the installed base about 2.8 terawatt hours in 2024. In the government's Clean Power Action Plan, that's forecast to increase 4 to 6 by 2030. NESO's own targets using their future energy scenarios has about 5.3 terawatt hours gigawatts by 2030. So quite a phenomenal increase in requirements. So those few slides just gives you a bit of a background to what's happening in the energy transition in the UK and the importance that government and NESO is putting on long duration energy storage. What I'm now going to talk about is to explain to you what is liquid air. So this chart shows a very high level summary of the process of our liquid air technology. So on the left hand side is the compressor. What we do is we just take normal ambient air, we clean it, we take out the carbon dioxide, we take out the moisture, we then compress it. The waste heat is stored, and I'll come back to that in a moment. We compress it, we cool it, and then we store it in large steel vessels in the form of a liquid air, cryogenic air. When we want that energy back, we expand it, put it through a turbine to then generate the electricity. During that expansion process, we again store the waste heat. And that waste heat is kept in steel vessels which contain gravel. We then swap the waste heat and waste cold to the other end of the process, which improves the overall round trip efficiency from what would otherwise be, say, 30% to something which is between 50 plus percent. And that's really the clever bit. The clever bit is recycling the waste heat and the waste cold to the other end of the process to improve the overall round trip efficiency. The hot store is in the form of molten salts. So that's the technology that we're using in our case. We also, and this is what's shown on the right-hand side, we put a clutch between the generator and the rest of the plant. And this means, and we also add in a flywheel. And this means that the generator and the flywheel can act as a stability island, providing grid services to the system operator 24/7, irrespective of what's happening in the rest of the plant. And this synchronous generation is really needed in the UK, and a very, very important part of our needs case. How does liquid air compare to other technologies? First comment in terms of capacity and duration, we can actually size the compressor and the generator to fit a particular market. So in the UK, we're dominated by excess wind. That tends to mean you have long periods of excess wind and shorter periods of gaps when there's less wind. So we deliberately size the compressor to be smaller than the generator. That means that we store over a long period of time and then export between the gaps. We can also size the number of tanks and the size of the generator compressor themselves to fit the particular needs. If you want more duration, we simply add more liquid air tanks to it. We provide stability services. As I've already mentioned, we are a synchronous generation. By using the clutch, we can provide that stability services 24/7. We're economically viable. We've managed to get funding for our Carrington project. That was a merchant project. There was no government support for that project. There was no long-term offtake contract. So that demonstrates that we can, that our projects are viable. We are already in the market today. We are building the Carrington project, and I'll talk more about the scale up for the larger ones. And I think that the next one, locatable, is a really, really key one. The important point, and the reason why you'd select liquid air, is the fact that you can locate it where it's needed. We don't rely on mountains like pumped hydro. We don't rely on underground cabins like compressed air. We can put our technology right next door to the substation where it's needed the most, where we can provide the most support, particularly in terms of stability services, to the system operator. And of course, we're scalable. We're right on planning our next projects, which are due to be built up by the end of 2030. Just to really kind of stress this point around grid services and the benefits to the system operator. This is a slide that I created by just listening to one of the very senior, the chief engineer of NESO, who spoke to shareholders on our behalf. So when we were fundraising for the Carrington project, NESO very kindly helped out by explaining why our technology was of use and would be used by NESO. And he talked about 7 engineering challenges of the system operator. And so I converted his words into a slide. And what he talked about is his 7 engineering challenges is that, firstly, they need more stability. Now, we clearly provide that through our stability island and the clutch. They need more frequency of control. Well, with high inertia of our technology, less frequency control is needed by technologies like batteries. We provide voltage support, which is critically important, particularly some of the locations we're looking at. We address thermal constraints because we locate our plants upstream of the constraints. We provide resource adequacy. We're another form of generation that can provide at different times of the day. And similar to that, we provide flexibility. We can generate when needed. And finally, we can also provide restoration or black start capabilities. So we address all of NESO's engineering challenges for net zero, which is why in the UK we've had a huge amount of support from NESO in terms of supporting our analysis when we go to investors. I've got a slide here on Carrington project. As I mentioned earlier, we raised £300 million to build Carrington project. This is a rendering of what the project looks like. When we raised the money in June of last year, we went straight into construction. We're looking to build out the project by the end of 26. It's most likely now to be sort of during in 27. But one bit which will be operational during 26 will be the Stability Island. So even at Carrington, we are looking to build up Stability Island first, and then the rest of the plant will follow. So during 2026, I think it's the latest update is around August, will be operational in that plant, and then the rest of the plant will follow in 2027. In the bottom of this slide, there's a bit of a history of the company. So as I mentioned, we've been around for about 16 years. We started off with laboratory work. In 2011, we built a pilot project. In 2018, we built a larger demonstrator project, a 15 megawatt hour project in 2018. We raised further funding. In 2023, Sumitomo, who's one of our investors, they have a technology license with us. They started to build their pilot project in Japan. Last month, that pilot project became operational and created its first liquid air. So in actual fact, the first project to be fully operational is not actually our project, it's the project with Sumitomo in Japan. And then in 2024, we raised the capital. The key investors that came in was it was called the Infrastructure Bank, it's now called the National Wealth Fund, Goldman Sachs, Centrica, Rio Tinto, and a number of other family offices, private equity companies came in. So we've got some very, very strong backers in the organisation. Here's another slide, shows what our another rendering of the plant. In this slide, you can see these are the liquid air tanks. So they are large vessels. They're quite tall, about 45 meters tall. So these are liquid air tanks. These tanks here are the high-grade cold store. So within these tanks is the gravel beds where we store the cold. These two tanks are the molten salt tanks. So we've got the cold one and the hot tank. We've got numerous heat exchangers across the whole plant to move the heat around. This is the turbine building, which we also call the power recovery unit, which also we call the Stability Island. So with the generator and all the electrical equipment that can act as the Stability Island. And this is the compressor building. So this is what the plant looks like. It's actually a large process plant. But the great thing about it is that there are no emissions. It is a fully closed system. So from a consenting point of view, really the only thing we have to think about is the visual impact, because it is a large process plant. But in terms of emissions, it is a closed loop system. We just take in air and we send out air. Here's a slide showing Carrington, the site at the moment. So we've started piling. This is about a month old. So many more piles have been put in. They've started constructing the foundation for the molten salt tank. This is what a liquid air vessel looks like. This is currently being fabricated. This is the inner of the tank. This is the assembling the inner and the outer tanks for the liquid air tank. This is the high-grade cold store tank in fabrication. And this is what the high-grade cold store tank looks when it's nearly complete, the fully assembled tank. Okay, so that's Carrington. Carrington is, as I said, in construction. All of the procurement contracts have been set. Really, what we're waiting for now is for the long lead term items to arrive. You can see that it's in construction. We have lots of photos of bits of kit being manufactured. On site at the moment, it's largely the start of the civils, and we'll start to see the plant kind of rise out the ground sort of from next year onwards. For the future, we are looking at much bigger projects, and we are looking at projects which, for the UK, were much bigger, so around 200 megawatts and 12 hours of storage. So we are also looking to improve the technology by adding in some battery storage as well. What that does is that enables us to use the battery storage for short, or would otherwise be short compressor runs. So you can optimize the overall plant by using the best of both technologies. So our proposal for the UK is a 200 megawatt, 12-hour liquid air project, but with 800 megawatt hours of battery storage, which should give you a total overall capacity of 3.2 gigawatt hours or 3,200 megawatt hours. This is a rendering what the plant would look like. Obviously, by the nature of size, there's many more tanks. It's a much bigger project. And on the right-hand side, you can see what would be ultimately the layout of the battery projects. Where we are at the moment is this design is a default design would be based purely off Carrington, so we can very easily just scale up Carrington with exactly the same design. We're not necessarily going to do that. We're going to incorporate a number of design optimizations in the process. We haven't made the final decision, but we may, for example, increase the pressure or the temperatures, which will give us either an improved round trip efficiency or savings on the constructability. What we're doing right now is that we're about to engage with an EPC contractor to do the detailed FEED study of the scale-up exercise. We've spent a lot of time doing conceptual work about looking at what things we want to look at during that FEED study. We're now actually going to start doing the FEED study itself. What we are working towards is the cap and floor. So, as I said at the very beginning, the UK has introduced the cap and floor mechanism. The cap and floor is designed such that if you are given one, the cap and floor will provide you a floor on your revenues, but in return for that, you'll pay out if your revenues go above the cap. That means that you can then raise funding. With the cap and floor, so the merchant risk is taken away, allows you to then be able to raise finance, particularly debt for projects. So this is critically important when you go for the bigger, larger projects. We don't believe that we could repeat a Carrington merchant project when you go for a larger project because the funding is just too big. So the purpose of the cap and floor is it will give protection to both equity and debt providers for up to 25 years and potentially even longer. As I said, the government DESNZ has given the mandate to Ofgem to implement this. In March of this year, Ofgem and the government set out their decision on how it's going to be implemented, what kind of projects can take part. The decision was that 8-hour plus projects can take part. They need to be a certain size and a certain technology level readiness. We put a number of projects into that process, and 2 of our projects were deemed to be successful. We are now very, very busy, and that's what we're doing right now. Having been successful with project eligibility on 2 projects, we're now preparing our project assessment application, which is due next week. And what project assessment is that Ofgem, with NISA's support, will be doing a customer benefit analysis. And those projects which are deemed to provide benefits, the best benefits to the customers, will be given a cap and floor. And that decision will be made public in the interim results in April next year and the final results in July next year. Obviously, it goes without saying this is of huge importance to Highview, and we are very, very busy putting together our best case for that application. Where are our 2 projects? So the 2 projects are Huntston and Killinghome. These are both great locations. We've been working very together as a business development team, but with the power systems engineering team. Been working very closely to understand where are the best locations to site these projects. Huntston is very, very interesting because the whole of Scotland is short of synchronous generation. It is also very, very long on renewables. So there are a lot of problems in the Huntston region in particular. There used to be a nuclear power plant there. That's now been stopped operation. And the fact that that large amount of synchronous generation has disappeared from the network has meant the Huntston location's got some big problems. So we can install our project at Huntston and solve those problems. Killinghome is slightly different. Killinghome is the home of, it's a very industrial location. It's the Humber, lots of petrochemical facilities, lots of other power plants or CCGT. But all of those power plants will be ceasing operations or reducing operations in the future, which will lead to stability issues at that particular location. It's also a location where a large amount of offshore wind comes into those substations at those locations. So both of those locations are very, very good for our technology. And we've got good industrial locations next door to substations, which means that they're all suitable for planning and consent. So those are the two projects that we are looking to put through the cap and floor process. And as you know, at Huntston, we've already started construction because last week we announced the funding on the Stability Island. This sort of brings me to the end of almost the end of my presentation. Just to recap, we're not just looking at the UK. We've also got a team in Australia. They're doing a number of things. They're doing some work with Rio on the Pilbara transmission network. They're doing some work in the Northern Territory, looking at how we can enable them to reduce the amount of thermal generation that they use for their network. And we're also doing some work in Queensland, looking at how we can introduce our technology to reduce the reliance on coal generation. But in all cases, our conversation normally starts with what is the power system situation and what are the power system needs, which is where my colleagues go in first to identify what the needs are, and therefore what the solution is, and then we follow up with a business development team on developing projects. So final slide for me, just to recap, what are we doing in the UK? It's all about completing Carrington and Huntston Stability Island construction projects and securing the cap and floor for our next two. Australia, it's the Northern Territory and the Pilbara and Queensland projects, which are some early stage development. In terms of technology development, our focus is on the FEED study, scaling up the Carrington design for a much larger project. And then for the power systems engineering team, it's working on the new markets, so the UK, but also the new markets in terms of identifying the need for Australia and Ireland. So great, that's it from me. I'm now going to pass over to Eugenie, who's going to share some of the analytical tools that we've got.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm Eugenie Ducoin. I'm the lead power system analyst for Highview, and I'm responsible for the power system models that we use, as Mark said, to drive the business decisions of where to go and how to design the plans and what are the solutions needed for the grid. So I'm going to quickly try to do it as quickly as possible so that we have some time for discussion. So we have two main models. The first one is an energy model and the second one is a stability model. And I'll start with the energy one, which I think is a bit easier to understand. So this is a model for 2040 of the GB grid. We model everything for the transmission network in our models. So you can see we have all of the lines, all of the substations. We have HVDC links. We have interconnectors to other countries. At every single node, we also model all of the generation that is connected, whether that's gas generation or wind or solar. We model storage, batteries, demand. We model everything. And then what we do is that for an entire year, we give a profile for wind, for solar, for interconnectors, for demand. And then we let what we call OPF run, which is optimal power flow. And what it does is that this model decides which generation is best to supply the demand. And this takes into account constraints such as line thermal limits, constraints such as some generator must run for a minimum of X hours, so that will look into that. This model will also look into the future of how much wind is expected in the next day, or how much demand is expected next, to try and optimally choose which generation should be turned on at every single hour of a future year. So this is 2040, we've also done 2030. We run different scenarios. Some scenarios such as clean power, which was designed by the government and NISO together. We also run more central scenarios such as Aurora, AFRI, etc. So this model will calculate and give us volumes that we can expect in the future when the grid is optimally run. And this is also with this model that we can say that the curtailment that the grid expects in 10 years, in 15 years, we think is much lower than what we will get, because we can run the scenarios with their exact assumptions, but our model compared to theirs models all of the lines, whereas they would have zonal models. So you would have just Scotland represented as just two big black boxes, and then England split in a few more boxes, but they are missing a lot of interactions that happens within those boxes, which mean that a lot more wind would be curtailed than what they expect, and we can capture that. So this is the first model, and I'm conscious of time, so I will show you the second model, which is stability model, and I'll show an example of the study that we've done for Hunterston, which is the assets that we've just raised funding for. Hunterston is located in Scotland, just here, and it is at one end of an HVDC line, which is supposed to basically take the wind from Scotland and bring it down to England, where all of the demand is, most of the demand is. And what we have noticed is that it looks like the HVDC link was not performing as it was supposed to. And we saw that sometimes wind was curtailed in Scotland, and gas generation was turned on in England. And we thought, why is this going on? This does not seem like an optimal way to run a system. So we built a second model with all of the line, substation, etc., the same as the other model, shown here, except that in this one, we also have substation configurations. So for example, here in New Deer, we have modeled the transformers that go down to lower voltage levels. We have reactive compensation. We have every single unit of generation modeled, SVCs, reactors, etc. So what we have done, and what I will show you today, is we have looked at a specific point in time when we noticed that wind was curtailed in the north and CCGT was turned on in the south. And we took all of the set points for power and input that into our model so that we could study the voltage stability of that specific point in time. So the very first simulation that I do is to solve for voltage in the grid. And we look at what happened actually on that hour. So you see here, green means the voltage is within the limits that are allowed by the system operator. So this is what happened. This is Hunterston with the HVDC link starting from here. And everything looks good, which is what you hope to see when studying the grid. Now we said, okay, well, let's see what happens if we increase the flow through the HVDC link and basically turn that wind farm back on, turn off that CCGT, and see what happens. So what I'm doing right now is increasing the flow through the HVDC link. And when you increase the flow, the active power, you also must increase the reactive power demand. And it's the reactive power demand that is creating problems for the voltage. So I run this second simulation, and we see that clearly now we have voltages in the red and orange in the area of Hunterstone, because now the HVDC link is pulling more power from Scotland, but also more reactive power, which means that the voltage are dropping. So the final simulation that I will do is to connect our stability island at Hunterstone. And when I do that, the stability island can provide, I'm sure Max mentioned, inertia, short circuit level, but also, and more importantly in this case, reactive power. So if I zoom in into our asset here, you can see that in this case, Q is the reactive power. It's providing 314 megawatts of reactive power, which means that now the voltages are back to the levels that they should be. So we have done this analysis. We have compiled it into a nice letter to NISO, the system operator, who have responded and validated our analysis and agreed that indeed there was a problem for reactive power in the region. And that letter has greatly helped to raise funding for Hunterstone. So when Mark said that power system analytics were really driving the business, is what this means. So I'll stop here so we have some time for questions. So please. Thank you.
Thank you. And should anyone have questions to Highview Power, please raise hands and we will handle the questioning. I don't see any hands up. However, I would have one question to you guys. What is the reaction time of the system to the request of the system operator?
So, there's a couple of reaction times actually. So, if we're doing energy-based services, i.e., being in demand or generating, we operate very similar to another mechanical type process. So, we would be available and distributing power within half an hour, which is in the same period as our balancing mechanism. So we're not a dynamic system like battery energy storage is. That's why we hybridize with BESS to allow us to do those bits. But we're a structural infrastructure type asset, very similar to what a peaker would look like or what a CCGT would look like. That the power is from a synchronous machine, so the quality is good. There's no harmonics, etc. Unlike other inverter-based technologies. Our response for inertia, short circuits, and dynamic reactive power is as fast as anything there is, because we can synchronize our stability island outside of using our storage. So where a battery energy storage system, a BESS, a lithium ion, would have to retain some of its energy to provide synthetic inertia and things like that. We don't have to worry about that because we get all of that from the synchronized mass of our generator. So the reaction time is as fast as anything for those services. But we don't, outside of dynamic containment, moderation, regulation, which we let the BESS do, we just dispatch normally in any balancing mechanism or day-ahead market.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If anyone has, I see. Please, Zoltan Nagy.
Yes, you are listening me? You are listening me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question is, what is the efficiency of the liquidation of air? This means that how the input energy you are get in and how much you take back at the end? What is the ratio? Is the first question. And the second one, when you are vaporize back the liquid air, the air is a multi-component gas, which started first the hydrogen, after then the oxygen, nitrogen, the different components. And there is no any problems about this process because you will be selected the different type of the real vaporization gases.
Yeah, so you're right, but we have something called an APU. So to answer your second part, we have something called an APU, which is an air purification unit, and that is in the process which allows us to strip out some of the contaminants that may cause blockages throughout the system. So we do clean the air before we refrigerate it and then turn it into liquid air. So our efficiency as a standalone asset is around about 50%. But if we co-locate with a cold source like LNG, we can get upwards of 60 to 65% efficiency. So, but when we deploy the asset in a wind-dominated power system, we don't need to be so efficient because the wind is on for so long and there's so much of it, you're able to provide demand for longer periods if you're not as efficient, which, by the way, is really useful on a power system because a lot of the problems get caused when there is no demand and the gain takes over and you end up with high voltages. So we see the benefits of having longer periods where we can compress.
We are right at the moment, we're doing a lot of customer benefit analysis to support our cap and floor projects. And so we're not modelling not just our projects, but also modelling competitor projects, which are effectively just standalone battery projects. And we do come out more favourable. The reason is well, first, the reason that Gary's just said is that we're storing what would otherwise be waste energy. But secondly, we have no degradation in the plant. And thirdly, the life of our asset could be up to 50 years. It's the same with the thermal plant. You're just pushing air through steel, so that the life of the plant is very, very long. So, and then fourthly, and this is the most important point, when you add in the benefits of the stability, the synchronous generation, it puts an asset considerably in a far, far better position in terms of customer benefit analysis or an economic analysis than a standalone battery project.
Yeah.
So yes, we recognise that if you want to just try and compare the projects in terms of round trip efficiency, we're lower. But when you consider the more rounded benefits that we provide, we're actually much, much better.
And let me just add something to support what Mark's saying. So, for instance, our system, the liquid air system, will last for 50 years, right? And that will give you a continuous output without degradation for 50 years plus. If we wanted to achieve that with a lithium-ion battery, and which we do deploy them ourselves, we need to last 25 years, we have to overbuild our battery by 50%. That's just to last 25 years. So we've got a 800 megawatt hour battery that we want to last for 25 years. Only one cycle a day, we have to install 1200 megawatt hours. And on year 26, we have to change the whole thing out. So that gives you the idea that you may look for a really good outcome with a single battery on day one. But if you actually look at the mechanics and what you need to do, it's a little bit different than what people advertise. And we're very, we understand that we're very open about what we are, but we also know the limitations of the lithium-ion battery as well. So on day one, overbuild by 50% to get to 25 years. And on year 26, it is likely that you're going to have to repower. So, that's what you really should consider.
May I add some more question?
Yeah.
Generally, this is for UK, where you have a wind. And what you are suggested about that, about the middle central European parts is like Hungary, where we have maybe more solars, but not wind. and there is the effect and the economic calculation is, I'm afraid, of generally different. So this is majorly based on the wind project.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, though, Zoltan, we actually deploy this asset in Australia, in the Northern Territories, where there is high solar. All we do is we increase our compression, which means that we generate the liquid air inventory over a single day cycle. So we overcompress in the day, we store, and then we discharge slower overnight. The synchronous ability of the asset allows us to firm a grid. So from Catherine to Darwin, the three assets are able to firm up that entire grid. We also deploy batteries there for some response and to support the compressor, but you cannot run the grid with just inverter-based resources. Impossible. So I don't, maybe if you're an interconnected system with your neighbours who have a lot of synchronous generation on all the time, possible. But if you look at what happened in Spain and other areas, you cannot just go fully inverter based. It's going to cause you more problems than it is solutions. So I understand what you're saying, but we've done this in the Northern Territories in Australia where it's fully solar impacted. That's the reality. You're well interconnected with your neighbours, and then they're providing you all your short circuit power. Don't forget, inverter-based resources generate a lot of harmonics. Harmonics mess with protection systems. If your protection systems don't operate, then you're going to get islanded, and that's what happened in Spain. So I think you need to weigh those things up as well.
Okay.
Thank you. So if anyone has any other question, please raise hands. Otherwise, I'm going to thank you for this comprehensive answer and ask Alex to join us for the next session of today's meeting. So, Alex, the word is yours.
Sorry, I was just chasing windows. Let me turn my camera on. So, hopefully you can see me and hear me.
Yeah, nicely.
Excellent. Good. Then let's get straight on with it. Share. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, we do.
Excellent. Okay, my name is Alex Hunter. I'm the founder and CEO of Sherwood. We do scalable electricity energy storage in the range of 1 to 100 megawatts over multi-hour durations, so between sort of up to around about 1200 megawatt hours. And we do it using compressed air and heat. We do it for industrial clients, grids, solar and wind, and commercial property developers. So we sit at the end, the off-taker point of the grid, if you like, where we've just heard from Highview the situation that's going on at the centre of the grid. We have a slightly different view in the future. We think the energy transition is at risk because current grid infrastructure is not designed to actually deal with the constraints which new renewable generation is actually putting on the system. So we already heard that balancing costs are going through the roof. This means that the number of times that the grid has to intervene to either turn up or turn down generation to respond to variable generation from wind and solar. The numbers are a little bit eye-watering. They're currently exceeding 55 billion annually, global balancing costs. So these costs are not just absorbed by the grid, they're passed on to the end user as the end user cost. So if we just go to the grid and say we want to adjust our grid and make it an all singing, all dancing grid to do all things for everybody, that's going to take a very long time. It's going to take a minimum of 15 years, and it's going to prove to be very, very costly. Now, these aren't our figures. These are figures coming out of the International Energy Agency, Bloomberg, and others. 3 to 3.5 trillion US dollars by 2030 alone annually for global improvements to grids to upgrade. So we've got a time delay problem and we've got a cost problem. And then the final copper nail in the coffin, sorry for the pun, is the availability of copper for those grids. 2022 copper was up around about 5.5 kilotons. We need to increase that by 5 times if we want to actually get to where we need to. And the trouble is that to open a new copper mine, get it permitted, do all the planning, and then start extracting useful copper, you're going to be looking at 20 to 30 years. So that again is a huge delay. And that's why we feel that the renewable energy transition is at risk. So we believe energy storage is essential to overcome infrastructure issues and to help balance supply and demand, buy some time effectively for things to catch up. I think we all know what energy is capable of, but where we come in, like Highview, we're not really interested in the frequency markets. That is very much the realm of lithium ion, and it's a very small segment of the world's energy storage. 93% of the world's energy storage being megawatts for hours rather than just pure megawatts, is done by hydro. It's 93% of it's by hydro, pumped hydro storage. So what we do is we like to take some surplus renewable energy, that can be wind, can be solar, could be anything which is classed as a renewable generation asset, and we bank the energy. We bank the energy into our storage, and then we time shift it. We time shift it to a time where that renewable energy is not as in excess and there is still a significant demand. So effectively what we're doing is balancing supply and demand using energy storage as a bank account, more or less the same way you pay your money in and out of a bank account to balance your budget during the month. However, current installed energy storage is nothing like sufficient for the needs of where we're going. And we heard just before a little bit about the increased generation plans for wind and solar. That's just adding more and more variability into a grid which is already struggling. So this is a European figure, and the European Commission says that we're going to need by 2030 alone, plus or minus roughly 288 terawatt hours. So that's megawatts, gigawatts, up to terawatts, so 10 to the 9 of storage. Of this slide, there's an even more eye-watering figure. That's got to increase 7.5 times to 2,189 terawatt hours by 2050. And that would represent roughly 30% of demand. So today, there are already in the marketplace solutions for property developers and also for businesses and also for solar plants. However, they generally come with a high levelized cost of storage, meaning the cost per capital for unit for that particular asset. They don't solve the grid connection delays, which is something that hasn't been talked about yet. In the UK, you can still face up to 10 to 15 years wait just to get a grid connection or a grid capacity increase. And they don't solve grid transmission losses. So we very much believe that power should be generated, stored and consumed at the point of consumption. And just to speak to that for a moment, if I was going to build a new factory and I wanted to put another form of generation in there, say I wanted to put a compressor in there, a compressed air system. Would I think about putting my compressed air system 100 kilometers away? I don't think so. Because then you would end up with a cost of transmission and you would lose a lot of your pressure, aka voltage, as you move that power from A to B. Then you've got all the planning considerations and also then what happens in storms and damage, etc., etc. I think you get the point that it's easier if you have power right near where it's going to be consumed. Current battery systems, as was alluded to before as well, they are limited by the number of cycles they can do. They generally have an 8-year warranty on them. They are price volatile depending on how the market's taking up electric vehicles, for example, and the availability of lithium and other trace metals, cobalt and others. And as you increase the capacity of those assets in terms of duration, the cost of them spiral because they actually take up more and more land. You can't just stack lithium on top of each other. You have to leave a fire gap. So if you want to increase the duration, in other words, the hours that your let's say 50 megawatt lithium-ion battery is going to run, then you're going to need a lot of land, a lot of space. And generally, lithium talks in power, talks about number of megawatts it is. So let's say it's a 50 megawatt system. And then the first question is, okay, how long do you do that for? Well, we can do that for 30 minutes. So in actual fact, it's a 25 megawatt hour system. So it's always good to look at what are the two factors with both power and energy. So one is what is the raw power, the badge power, megawatts, and then the next thing is how long do you want that for, which is energy. A bit like the fuel in your car. The engine at the front of your car gives you your kilowatts. The fuel tank tells you how long it's going to run for. Energy. A lot of these existing assets, if we look at pumped hydro storage, they have very long build-out times, and they're commercially limited by their geology and are often far away from demand. That is the case in China, where they built the Three Gorges project, and that's in the north of China, but most of the demand is in the south of China, so they have to ring a whole load of new cables all the way from the north to the south. And existing cases, so existing compressed air energy storage, is low efficiency due to heat losses to atmosphere. So quick look at relative costs of cost comparison of different technologies. Hydrogen is still very expensive as a vector. Flow batteries are okay. Sorry, this graph actually going up the y-axis is the cents, US cents per kilowatt hour, levelized cost of storage. And along the bottom is duration of storage, going on a logarithmic scale, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 100 plus at the end there. So flow batteries take off around about sort of 11 hours, 12 hours. They really start being expensive assets. Existing hydro is a very, very good and reliable source of energy storage and has a very good levelized cost of storage, but has some limitations in terms of build-out times, like I just said. Existing compressed air energy storage, Huntdorf in Germany, has been in play since 1978 and is still running to this day. So this is the sort of duration of assets that you can see using compressed air systems. And the cost of that is down below the 20 cents mark. So you're looking at roughly about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. And then we come in below that. And just a quick footnote, we are above ground energy storage. So we store our energy above ground. We're not geographically limited by underground salt caverns. So our system is completely standalone. So we believe we offer Europe's most scalable, environmentally friendly and efficient advanced adiabatic compressed air energy storage. That is a real mouthful. Adiabatic, what it actually means is it means you're allowing the compressed air to heat up when it gets compressed. You can't stop that process unless you compress air extremely slowly. So What we do is we allow it to heat up, but then as it's heating up, we capture all that heat energy. So we end up with a very high efficiency. We end up with an efficiency level approaching 80%, with more or less zero capacity loss over time. And we capture, and this has been proven out and validated by Imperial College London, the top chemical engineering school in the country, and in the world for that matter, that we capture 99% of our heat energy. We are a low-cost asset in terms of the levelized cost of storage, and we can, for a customer, and this is vitally important, we can reduce their electricity bills by up to 40%. Now, in Europe, we have in the UK electricity costs, even to small to medium-sized enterprises, which are between 20 and 24 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, just to give you that in context, China has 2 pence per kilowatt hour overnight and a maximum of 10 pence per kilowatt hour during the day. That's at their peak. India is the same. So the West is gradually becoming more and more uncompetitive as far as electricity costs are going as we move our systems greener. So we must work to reduce the costs of our systems to end users. And that's where our focus is. In the northeast of England, we've just lost 2 chemical companies due to high energy costs, and 500 jobs have just gone as they relocate to other parts of the world. So we are flexible and scalable. We can be placed anywhere. We don't have a geographic limitation. We can do intraday storage, meaning that we can do 2 times 12 hours. Sorry. 1 times 6 hours twice, I should say, which gets us 12 hours. We could even do charge one day and discharge the next day, but the commercial models basically work best if you're doing intraday charging and discharging. And we can deploy in months, not years, and we're scalable, as I said. And we're super sustainable because we take fresh air and we use it as a storage mechanism along with the heat, and then we give it back to the atmosphere. Generally, we can save between 40 and 45% of a customer's costs for each megawatt hour of storage capacity compared to flow batteries. And we can last 2 times longer, or 2.5 times longer than a lithium-ion equivalent. So why are we different? We started, by the way, in 2016 on this adventure, and we're commercializing at the moment. Sadly, we're not commercializing fully in Europe at the moment, but we intend to. We have our first commercial project in China and also a joint venture in China. We have a memorandum of understanding in India, and we have 10 active projects we're pursuing in India. Anything from airports through to logistics, through to cold storage, through to manufacturing, through to process engineering. So the way our system works, we take excess wind and solar, which can be a solar farm co-located near the use point, or it can be actually on the user's site. There's a very good website I would really suggest all of you could have a look at. It's called RE100. There we go. Renewable Energy 100%. It stands for. It was started by IKEA, and now there are over 420 companies in that cluster who are looking to become more or less self-sufficient with the energy they generate and consume. So we use that energy to drive super efficient electric motors. There's a good reason why we're in China. China is producing some of the world's best electric motors at the moment. Save a very good English company who's also doing some very good work on electric motors, but they drive the compressors. The compressors suck in air. The compression process generates heat. We store that heat in water It's one of the best things around in the world to store heat. It has been used for many, many years to store heat. So we store our excess heat as water, and we store the air above ground in standard tanks. When at that point your system is fully charged. Our system is asymmetric, by the way, so it can charge and discharge at different points. It's extremely flexible. We can change the speed of charge. We can change the amount or duration of discharge. We can also change the power at discharge. So later, you want that energy back out again. Say you've harvested solar during the day, with a typical use case, and you want to get that back at night time. So at night time, you let the air out of the tanks. It comes out supersonic, hits the heat and goes hypersonic, and then it hits a turbo expander generator, used in the oil and gas industry for many years, and also used in the cryogenics industry for many years. The last sort of cryogenics Linde, I believe, was 1900s when the Linde process was first done. And if we look at oil and gas, that's been around for about the last 90 years. So these are existing bits of equipment. I've talked to a number of companies around the world who do this, and I've identified, just through my research and supply chain investigations, 20 companies worldwide who can do turbo expander generators. So commodity items, all of these things are commodity items all over the world. So the client gets lovely green electricity out of one side from the generator, and out of the other side we get a nice cool stream of air which we can put to use and commoditize. We also have some excess heat which we didn't integrate into the system, which is part of the inefficiency. So we have some heat which can be turned into steam. So what are we actually doing? We are time shifting when energy is both generated and consumed by the dynamic management of pressure and heat. And our secret sauce is the fact that we capture 99% of that heat energy. We have patented a brand new compression technology, which is stage 3 of our compression technology. I've only shown one compressor there, but there are in fact 3 stages of compression to get to our final pressure. So apologies to Highview, I haven't put liquid energy storage on this comparison. I should have done probably. But let's just look at the ones that are here. We're beating alternative energy solutions. Pumped hydro, I've done it to death already. Let's stay there. This is an interesting one. Sodium iron phosphate batteries, BASF, great company. The jury's a little bit out on the sodium ion batteries, sodium phosphate batteries at the moment, because there isn't enough run hours on them, but they're showing good promise and a technology to look out for. Flow batteries, infinity energy systems. You can see the sort of things, the factors that we're looking at. We look at efficiency, competitive price, lifespan, flexible on location, flexible sizing, emissions, quick deployment, and what happens at the end of life, disposal. Hydrostore, an existing cases company who are again doing big projects and again taking quite a long time to deliver those big projects. We're doing much smaller projects, which allows us to deliver effectively an out-of-the-box solution. I know somebody's going to ask, so I'll head this one off at the pass. Here we go. Here's an idea of the sort of footprint that we occupy. Now, in the little blue box over there, which is the 40-foot container, we can do anything from 1 to 10 megawatts of power. The cylinders, so effectively that's like the engine in your car, and the cylinders on the right hand side, one of those stacks represents 1 megawatt hour. So that gives you an idea. If you want to keep adding megawatt hours, just like Lego bricks, you just keep stacking them up. And we're not limited by having to space things apart or by fire risks or anything of that nature. So we can get on and scale our solution. If you want to do a 5 megawatt hour system, 1 megawatt for 5 hours, for example, again, we're getting a lot of inquiries down this sort of size level. Then you're looking at an area of 173 meters squared. So we think we are reasonable in terms of land mass. Market-wise, I made this presentation in China, and they said that they laughed when they put the first bubble up here, and they said total addressable market is 32 billion. They said, well, we can do that in China alone, and so what's the rest of the world adding up to? And that's the reason why we are in China at the moment, because we all know that a lot of the production has moved to China. Most of the machinery which I'm looking for is made in China, largely under license from Western companies, or indeed in partnership with Western companies and joint ventures with Western companies. But Europe has a sales addressable market of roughly 16 billion, and we reckon a total addressable market for us, just to start off with, is roughly about 1 billion. So our progress to date, we've pretty much finished all the commercial stuff and all the build out of the equipment in terms of design lockdown, and we have a joint venture in China. With that joint venture, we've secured a £1.1 million contract, which is currently being built at the moment. We have sales distribution agreements in the UK, and also an MOU already established in India, which is also taking us into the United Arab Emirates. There is licensing deals also coming out of India. We've been very fortunate and very pleased to be funded partly by the UK government through UKRI and also through Innovate UK, and a lot of our outreach into India was particularly funded by Innovate UK. So big thanks to them there and to the UK government. Product progress, as I said, we're building in China. It's 2,000 kilowatt hours, which is effectively 1 megawatt for 2 hours. Scalable after that up to 4 megawatt hours. Scalable after that up to 8 megawatt hours. It's a white paper project, which once approved then allows us to scale 10 to 20 further projects, which are then coming down the line. And the particular use case there is there are time of use tariffs coming in China. In fact, they already exist in China, and they want to time shift some of that overnight electricity, which is very cheap, as I said, at 2 pence or 2 cents per kilowatt hour, to daytime when it jumps up to roughly 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 11 cents per kilowatt hour. So they want to trade through that area using that cheap nighttime energy. So we're looking at going through the direct sales route, through energy brokers, through existing EPC companies, through existing solar and wind companies. We partner with all of those. And we're selling to, you can see a lot of logistics and food in here, because that's our strategic first market that we're going for. Although I have to say that of the 10 projects we have in India, we have both airports, as I said, we even have some gambling casinos on there. So the use cases are enormous. Part of our trouble at the moment is actually just picking the best situations to follow. So first we sell capital equipment, and then we wrap around that an O&M, operation and maintenance contract. In phase 2, we load in asset finance and then allow companies to just do exactly as they would do normally and buy energy as a service. Our team is led by non-executive chair James Robson, and achieved his MBE for services to industries, specifically in the Northeast, in an organisation called NEPIC, and growing 2 of his own companies in the Northeast. And that's in the process industry sector, so chemical industry sector. So he has deep connections into a lot of companies using a lot of energy. That's me, myself. I've commercialized 11 international patents. My background's in compressed air, vacuum, and refrigeration equipment, and also filtration, and then a little bit of telemetry, and then a little bit of domestic and commercial heating, replacing kerosene with heat pumps and solar thermal. Daniel Hunter is my brother, and he is our FD, our financial director, and also has other interests. And finally, our chief technical officer, Ray Sachs, Dr. Ray Sachs, did 40 years with Air Products Cryogenics, so knows a thing or two about compression and expansion. We started, as I say, way back in 2016. We patented at that point, and now we're commercializing, coming to market. We expect our unit in China to be ready in the end of Q1, going commercial. And as I say, that's a white paper project. This is just a little bit about a little slide put together about large centralized systems versus small local generation. And the basic thinking is this: if you move your generating source far away from the point of consumption, you incur a cost, and that cost is the transmission and distribution network. And it's the very reason why vacuum systems, compressor systems, refrigeration systems do not operate on this basis. The electricity system is unique in the way it's being constructed. It was constructed to be an all-singing, all-dancing centralized network, which allows power to come to every single house, which I fully agree with, and I think is a great thing. But as we ask that old system to suddenly become dynamic and flexible and flow electricity in two directions, then it starts becoming very, very expensive and very, very difficult to manage. So then we think it's better to maybe look at how can we generate, store and utilize electricity at the point of use, rather than transmitting it loads and loads of miles and putting extra strain on the grid. And I think in the last talk, very quickly, they alluded to the amount of curtailment, which is called basically switching off wind turbines when there is too much energy coming onto the network. There is a boundary between Scotland and the northeast. It's called a B6 or B4, can't quite remember, boundary, and that is too narrow a pipe to get all this energy down to other parts of the country. That's why the wind turbines get switched off. £1 billion is what it costs. It doesn't cost National Grid £1 billion. It costs the end user £1 billion. And I want to bring our focus back to the end user and the cost of electricity, because the cost of electricity in the UK is costing jobs. And we need to actually do something about that as we greenify our electricity grid. It's not all about piling extra cost onto a central distribution system. Many manufacturers want to see a reduction and a consistent cost for their electricity. That's it from me. I'm sure I hope there will be some nice questions. It's a slightly different approach. What we would like to see is maybe 1,000 smaller generators distributed right next to the point of consumption, rather than one big generator pushing out to those consumption points.
Thank you, Alex, for this detailed presentation. I raised some questions, but you already answered it during the presentation time. I think we have some time available, so please do not hesitate to shoot questions to Alex. So if anyone has a question, please just raise hand. Okay, if not, I do. I still do some questions left. My question would be, what is the degradation time, or actually the degradation of the system during the lifetime? So what is the efficiency?
Okay, good question. So if we start with an efficiency of 80%, you will see more electricity being consumed, so a degradation in that round trip efficiency. But you're looking at fractions of percentages. Why? Because a lot of our equipment is non-contacting. So the generation side of our equipment is magnetically levitated, so non-contacting, spinning around at horrendous speeds, which I won't bore you with, but basically your car engine will do, if it's really going fast, roughly about 4,000 revs per minute. These things spin around about 30,000 RPM, 30,000 revs per minute, and they float dynamically in a magnetic field and generate electricity. So there is no wear and tear, no wear and tear on those parts. They have that particular piece of equipment, which is the generator side of the equipment, 100,000 hours mean time to failure. If you back calculate that, it's roughly 30 years. On the input side, we also have turbo equipment as well as conventional compressor equipment. And again, lifetime of that equipment is 25 to 30 years, and degradation is minimal as long as the operation and maintenance is good. That means changing lubricants, changing filters. You can get from very well engineered equipment long lifetimes. A standard compressor will last you 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone else?
I have another little. I'm going to throw this into the pot for everybody to think about. It's a question I asked, and it comes out at this figure. So excuse me for quoting it, because I've got no idea what it really means as a figure. So I asked ChatGPT, because I'm not clever enough to figure this out. I said, how many hydrocarbons in kilowatt hours are stored above ground today, ready for use? It said, roughly, by the time it had done a bit calculation backwards and forwards, 4 quadrillion kilowatt hours. 4 quadrillion. And then said, how much storage do we have currently of electricity? It's about 3 to 4 zeros shy of that. Another need 1,000 times more if we want to start trying to electrify some of the things that we want to electrify. And we need to change the way that we do it, because how does the hydrocarbon system deal with all this power that needs to be distributed? It is stored strategically throughout a network. It's stored at petrol stations. It's stored at fuel dumps, at ports. It's stored at refineries. So you don't have petrol piped directly to your door. It would be ludicrous.
Yeah. So I guess today was a wonderful event. Oh, a question, please, Danielle. Just shoot it. Or
Yeah,
it was just...
thank you very much. Would it be possible to go into even smaller sizes than 1 megawatt hour?
Realistically, not. Yes, you can, is the answer. Of course you can. However, there is a development cost to profile all of these expansion stages and to tool up all these expansion stages, which makes it prohibitive. So what you have to look at in the marketplace is, well, I can tell you that you can do an expansion turbine. Who's been to the dentist recently? Because every time you hear that nasty little drill that's about to drill into your teeth, that horrible zzz, zzz sound, that's a turbine. And that's about, a 1 kilowatt turbine, and it's doing exactly the same thing. You could equally use that to generate electricity. But to build a system realistically and to get to a sweet spot which hits, let's say, the midpoint of most a reasonable scale, if you like, to consume electricity, then a megawatt is a good get out of bed size.
Okay, and if we are talking about 1 megawatt, what would be the installation cost of a storage unit?
That depends on how long you want to store it for.
I mean, your system, how much would that
Yes,
cost
it
for
still
megawatt?
still depends on how long you want to store it for. And this is the disconnect, if you like, between lithium-ion batteries and longer duration storage assets. So if we just talk about raw megawatts, we can do raw megawatts at a levelized cost. Even if we look at that, it's about £250 per kilowatt hour. And then remember that we're going for 30 years, 25 to 30 years, and you'd have to buy a lithium-ion battery systems 2 to 3 times in that time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
No problem.
I also see another question from Pensacola in writing, so I will present the question. How does the revenue stack in China and India compare to the one in the UK? Is it based on similar components as in the UK, or is it fully regulated revenue streams?
So, a very good question. Thank you very much for that question. I can tell you that it's tight, and that's why another reason why we're there. We're in China and India because what we're interested in is what is the buy price of our power and what is the sell price of our power over the longer term. That's what gives us our return on the capital deployed. So when you say revenue stacks, maybe you're thinking about UK markets or European markets where there's arbitrage market and there's this market and there's that market and there's the other market. We don't play in that game, nor particularly do we want to play in that game. We're very much more interested in how do we shift a lump of energy priced at price A to a time zone when it's priced at price B, maybe 5-10 times more than whatever the original price was, and then we can actually make a margin in the middle of that to pay for the equipment and then basically the paybacks that we're looking at, to answer the question more fully, the paybacks we're looking at in India and China are around about 5 years. If I bring it to the UK at the sort of prices we're at the moment, we could probably get a payback in 1 year because of that delta. The difference between if we have an input of solar electricity at one price point and then the cost of grid power at another point, that delta is much greater in the West than it is in both India and China. But yes, it's regulated. Yes, it's regulated, and yes, you're effectively selling back to a state utility.
Okay, thank you. So, anyone else?
Well, if anybody wants to, they're more than welcome to reach out to me direct.
Sure. Then if no one else has some questions, then I would like to thank to our presenters today and also to the audience to being here. And I hope we see you next time in another webinar to share some knowledge in the industry. Thank you all for being here. Have a nice day.